Thank you. I'm Dr. Abby Fisher. I'm a behavioural scientist at University College London with a specific interest in promotion of physical activity for health. And today I'm going to share the talk with Adrian, who's the CEO of Six to Star, and we're going to describe some collaborative work that we've done together. So hopefully our talk will be as smooth as the collaboration has been. Okay, so I thought it was important to give some background and context first. So you probably know that physical activity is important for health. It reduces our risk of chronic disease substantially, particularly diabetes, heart disease and cancer. And there was a 200-page review submitted to the government in 2018, basically suggesting that physical activity is our best buy for public health, and physically active people sleep better, feel better and function better. So I thought that was quite a nice message. And we do have evidence-based guidelines, and for adults we should be doing at least 150 minutes of at least moderate physical activity per day. So moderate physical activity raises our heart rate and makes us feel a bit out of breath and warm. And there are child-specific guidelines as well. However, in the UK and worldwide we have a problem. Our activity levels are too low. So what you can see here is data from a large representative cohort called the Health Survey for England, where 5,000 individuals were asked to report their physical activity and to measure it wearing an accelerometer, which is this device here in the red. And this gives us a really good objective measure of physical activity. And if you look at the green bar here, what you can see is that less than 10% of our population are meeting even the minimum guidelines for health. And this declines substantially with age, and we always see this pattern. It declines with age, and men are less active than women. So we do have a problem here. And the picture, unfortunately, isn't much better in childhood. So these are data, accelerometer data from children in the Health Survey for England. And what you can see is in boys, in mid-childhood, around half of boys are meeting the childhood guidelines, less than half of girls. But this drops substantially into adolescence. And worldwide, you see this picture. So we have a real problem. And what we understand about behaviour is that throughout leisure time, our physical activity in leisure time is increasingly replaced by sedentary screen time. So we're really interested in whether we can harness what people are choosing to do in their leisure time anyway for good. So we're particularly interested in exergaming as a potential solution. It will never be the whole solution to low activity levels in the population, but it might be part of the solution. And I probably don't need to say this to this audience, but gaming's a recreational activity that is extremely popular and of interest to us as public health specialists. It's popular across genders and across socio-demographic groups as well. So a lot of people are choosing to do this in their leisure time. So we're really interested in whether we can harness this. In addition, a lot of investment has been put into public health interventions, and often they don't work. So we still don't know at population level what works to change physical activity behaviour. Yet some exergames have been hugely popular, so people are actually paying to exercise. So we feel that we can learn a lot from the gaming industry. There have been some lab-based studies and randomised controlled trials. A synthesis of studies of older generation exergames like Nintendo Wii have shown that they raise physical activity levels to a similar level as field-based activity, and they have similar health benefits. And interestingly, participants report them to be enjoyable and motivating as well. And there is some evidence, particularly in small lab trials, that immersion can enhance the exergaming experience. So when, for example, someone's compared immersive virtual reality gaming to two-dimensional gaming or to a behaviour like rowing, participants raise their activity levels to a similar level, but they report it to be more enjoyable. However, the existing data in this context tends to be relatively small samples, and they tend to be trials. So as scientists, we historically have seen the randomised control trial as the kind of gold standard design. But more and more we're realising, so a randomised control trial would be where you randomise your participants to either receive the exergaming intervention and compare them to a control on different measures. And we're sort of learning that actually that's probably not the best way to evaluate digital health interventions. It creates a slightly artificial situation, so we're not getting a picture of what real-world users actually want. So we're very interested in whether exergaming has potential as a population health intervention rather than these small lab-based experiments. And we want to understand what existing users want so that we can optimise the intervention. So we've been funded by the UK Medical Research Council to explore the potential of immersive virtual reality exercise gaming to engage people with physical activity. Ultimately, we want to explore its potential as a population health intervention. So because of the data I showed you where physical activity drops from childhood to adolescence, we're particularly interested in adolescents, but the data I'm going to present today is in adults because I thought that would be of more interest. So it's a collaboration between Six to Start and University College London, led by myself and Adrian, and we have a number of collaborators, mainly behavioural scientists and population health scientists and statisticians. And it's quite an interesting collaboration, we think, in the sense that the industry and academic partners worked together from the outset. So we came up with the idea together and we submitted a grant for public health funding together, and we were successful in that endeavour. So the funding we received from the Medical Research Council allowed us to do a number of development steps, background development steps for the virtual reality game development. So these are available on our website, and we have a number of associated publications which we will continue to update. But today, in the interest of time, I'm going to talk specifically about trying to get at what users of VR Exergames actually want. So 2 pieces of work in that development framework that we've conducted. So firstly, I'll talk about some work we've done on what specifically existing players of virtual reality Exergames want. And then Adrian will talk a bit about what Zombies Run users want and explain a bit more about that. So each of these development steps finally fed into a prototype game, which we're in the process of user testing. And this is one of our researchers playing our game. Okay, So before I go into the pieces of work, I thought it was really important, because of the novelty of the way we've approached this research as joint co-investigators, to highlight some of the challenges and benefits from my perspective in particular. So we have a shared end goal. We're interested in promotion of physical activity at a population level. But obviously we have very distinct expertise. So game designers know how to design games. We, as behavioural scientists, know how to evaluate. And in terms of challenges, one of the challenges that I think we faced is that doing rigorous academic research is very slow, and industry moves very quickly. So, for example, we were awarded 12 months of funding from the MRC initially, and to us that seemed very short, and to Adrian that seemed quite a long time. So it's juggling that mismatch in speed. There are issues potentially with intellectual property, so most of the public health research funders would want your product to be open source, but there are ways to work around that. And I think it's a good kind of collaboration, because we can provide rigorous data and sort of give data that are meaningful to public health funders. So we work in very different kind of evidence-based evidence environments, so we need to kind of give evidence that is going to be of interest to commissioners and public health funders, and that's something that we know how to do. And also, with some of the approaches that we take in our research, we think we can really get to the sort of core of what users engage with, and actually that's of benefit to both, because we can get at what works, and we can help kind of enhance the user experience. So the first study I'm going to present today is some work we did trying to understand what existing users of virtual reality Exergames actually like. So we looked at the online databases, and we tried to take the top 10 sort of positive and negative reviews of each of the top 10 games on those databases. And we conducted something called a thematic analysis. So that's where you take lots of free text and you pull out common themes. So we ended up with 29 games with around 500 reviews of those games. And our paper is being released any day now and will be available on our website as well. So I'm just going to give you some top-line findings. So basically, what we found was that users tend to like body movement that relates to real-world sport. Something that was of very much interest to us was the fact that they found immersion was really distracting from the exertion of physical activity. Unsurprisingly, the graphics were important. They liked multiplayer options. And again, important to us was that they were reporting that they got a proper workout, so that the level of exertion they were reaching matched real-world activity to them. And there were a number of factors that they found either helped them engage or disengage with the game. For example, motion sickness, the response of the developers, so developers who responded to issues quickly, they tended to view the game more favourably in that case, and the price as well. So because, as I said, our paper is available on the website, but I've pulled out just some quotes that I particularly like. So this person was a martial artist and basically said that although it wasn't exactly the same, it would help build skill level and increase fitness. This person was saying, I'm a nerd, I hate sports, and hate physical activity. But couldn't stop playing. So these are our kind of target audience for these types of games, and we thought this was really promising. As I said, another really common theme was immersion. So these people were saying that music, for example, when you were immersed, you didn't notice the level of exertion, and you didn't notice the time passing as well. So we thought that was really promising. So I'm going to hand you over to Adrian now to talk about the next phase in our research.
Hi, I'm Adrian Hon. I'm CEO of Six of Start. We're a London-based game developer. We're best known for Zombies Run, which is a smartphone fitness game for iPhone and Android. It was launched about 7 years ago. We have about 5 million downloads and 250,000 active users. It's the most popular smartphone fitness game in the world. It's kind of a basic augmented reality game. So you do, in fact, actually go outside running with this game. Just so a lot of people think it's like Temple Run. It's not. Zombies Run. You have to physically run outside. We track you using GPS, or we can use your accelerometer if you're on a treadmill. And as you're running, you've got your headphones in, and we turn your run into kind of a post-apocalyptic adventure where you have to run to survive. You collect supplies, you rescue survivors, you might get chased by zombies. If you get chased by a zombie, you need to physically speed up, otherwise you get caught. You don't die, because it's just a game, but you might go and lose some of the supplies you collected. So it's a way to make running more exciting and more motivating, and we combine gameplay with storytelling to get people to play more. So you can see a little bit about what Zombies Run does here. We've sort of combined storytelling, audio storytelling while you're running with fairly traditional base builder gameplay and collectible gameplay when you get back home again. And we have a fairly kind of robust online system, a bit like what you would see in Runkeeper or Nike or Strava, to track your runs, but with a kind of game layer on top of it. And so what we've done is we reached out to the Zombies Run user base to try and learn more about the people who are playing this game, because we've never really done a systematic study. We just try and make a game that people like and makes money. So we sent out a link to users in the app, also via our newsletter, which has about 1.5 million subscribers, and also on social media. And we're going to present some preliminary data from over 5,000 respondents today. And so, top line, most respondents are from the US, UK, Canada, Australia, Germany, so English-speaking countries. Most of Zombies Run's players are from North America, about 66%, about 2/3 of the users are from North America. Even though we're based in the UK, most people play it elsewhere. The average age was 33. There's a very wide age range, from 16 to 71. Most people are fairly young. To complete the survey, you're meant to be 16, but we know there are people who are younger than 16 playing the game. Really interesting. A lot of people think that a game called Zombies Run would be mostly played by men. That's not the case. the respondents were mostly female, and that sort of syncs up with what we've seen from our other social media data. Mostly white, lots of people with bachelor's degrees, fair number of people who have disabilities or illnesses that affects physical activity levels. And so we looked at the reasons for why people are using, starting to use Zombies Run. And so we had, so you can see the main takeaway here is that most of the people who started to use Zombies Run were not actually runners before they started. You have 15% of people who didn't run before, and they just wanted to play the game. They just thought the game sounded fun, and in order to play the game, you have to run. So maybe they weren't actually looking to run, they just wanted to play a cool, immersive game. Maybe they like zombies. Most people, half of the respondents, they didn't run before, and they saw this as a way to develop a running habit. So that's probably kind of what you'd imagine. And then you've got about a quarter of users who were already runners, but wanted to have a kind of new way, sort of add something maybe more interesting or something different to their run. What we found here is that only 12% of people who responded actually liked running. I don't know about you, I found running incredibly boring and tedious when I started out, and it seems like that's what a lot of our users found as well. We had quite a lot of users who just didn't like it at all. Since using Zombies Run, we found that the vast majority of users had their attitude changed. They're more positive about running and exercising. Some people haven't had their exercise habits changing. The vast majority of people have said that their exercise levels have increased because of Zombies Run. And kind of interestingly, we found a significant increase in physical activity levels after using Zombies Run. An increase of 84 minutes per week, which is pretty massive. A really interesting finding was that playing Zombies Run shifted people's exercise identity. So just to explain this, the red bar is what people consider themselves to be before playing, and the blue bar is, or the grey bar is what they considered themselves to be afterwards. So beforehand, about a third of people consider themselves to be gamers, and not many people consider themselves to be solely runners, but we saw an increase in people who identified themselves as a runner following playing the game. So maybe that's because they enjoyed running more, or they did running more, something like that. Most people counted themselves as a gamer and a runner afterwards. We also have been conducting qualitative interviews with users. Our players are very chatty. And we've found some really interesting results there. I found, by the way, that running tends to be one of the sort of easiest ways to exercise. It's cheapest ways, but it's also quite difficult to kind of get yourself to do it. So we found that reflected here. Running makes me feel happier, stronger, better. People talked about the storyline. That's a really important thing with Zombies Run. It's got 400 episodes of a story, so it's not just you hear zombies and you run faster. That would grow old after like a week. Instead, it's a bit more like The Walking Dead or Game of Thrones, where you've got an ongoing story and characters who you want to keep on returning to, like any RPG or adventure game. You want to find out what happens next. And so we found that it helped people kind of consider exercise as something that they really wanted to do. Really great way of starting to run. So should I hand over to you at this point?
So, in conclusion, really, talking about our next steps, we do have a very early prototype virtual reality game that we're nominally calling Walls for the user testing. And it's ongoing. So as I said, it was designed for adolescents. So we did a lot of development work with parents and adolescents themselves and tried to build into the game some of the key features that we thought they would find important. So we've done some work in schools, and we've found actually that, interestingly, adolescent girls particularly like this technology because they find wearing the headset means that they feel less embarrassed physically, and the teachers really like it as well. So we had a quote from one of the directors of digital learning just saying they felt like their students could experience the future. So our next steps will be to apply again to the Medical Research Council to fully build the prototype, and we've got some screenshots here. We're also doing a test at the moment at UCL. We're doing some user testing of the game itself and of some of the more common sort of commercial exergames like Beat Saber to look at the levels of intensity of exercise that people actually do reach. So if you're London-based and interested, do get in touch if you'd like to try the game. And Adrian, I don't know if you want to say anything particularly about the game, but...
Yeah, well, you know, I think it was a really interesting design challenge making an exercise game that would appeal to a wide range. I mean, Abby's already talked about the kind of fast pace of game development. When we started this, Beat Saber didn't exist, and when we ended it, like, it's really sort of taken over the VR world. And so one of the things we wanted to do was actually not just remake Beat Saber, and we made something that is a bit more about kind of control and about strength rather than about sort of fast twitch movement.
Yeah, and I think one thing that the parents of adolescents continually said was kind of intrinsically important to them was mental health. So it's a very calming VR space as well, and certainly our users have experienced that, so you're moving in a very calming space, which we find very interesting. So just want to acknowledge some of our virtual reality research team and some of our students who have been involved in this work. So Jamie's actually here at the back, and just to give you our website, and we'll continue to update with our papers, and eventually the VR game will be open source as well, but please do get in touch if you're interested in finding out more. Thanks.
So, questions? No question? There is one here. You have to turn it on, I think. Turn this on.
Thank you so much for your presentation. I wanted to know more about the IP issue. You said that there are ways around that, having to have it as an open source.
Yeah, so the Medical Research Council, we spent quite a few months going back and forward with a contract between UCL, Six to Start, and the MRC. So we found a contract that we were happy with initially, where some of the elements would be open source, and we were quite vague about what they would be, because at that point we hadn't even developed the game. Because obviously, in an ideal world, Six to Start would own some of it for commercial future use. So then the Medical Research Council kind of have made us make most of the key elements of the game open source. But again, I think we've still left that relatively vague as to what that means. Very happy to share our wording and contracts if you're interested, because it took us about 6 months to get there. So if we can speed anyone else's process up, then.
Yeah, I mean, from my point of view, you know, as a company, obviously, your default is you want to go and keep as much of the IP as possible. But you know, this is a prototype, and most prototypes don't end up being in a place where you can actually fully commercialize them. And so our feeling was, we'll do this, it's an experiment, we'll see if we can come up with something good. If we want to make something that's commercializable, we're probably going to start again anyway. So it's fine. You know, if we wanted to do the research, we had to make it open source and something that was important for us to participate in.
With exergaming, it feels like there's a natural tension in that when you're exercising, you kind of need to move around, and with VR games, you kind of don't want people to move around. How did you overcome that?
It's not easy. You know, I think there's a lot of sort of hardware and technology restrictions to VR exergaming still. You know, you get sweaty. You know, unless you have a wireless headset, you know, it could be a little bit unsafe. And so I think some of those are just going to get fixed through more modern hardware. You know, so we're going towards wireless headsets now. You know, it's probably going to be effectively standard in a couple of years' time. I'm not sure that I buy the problem that you need a massive amount of space to do VR exercising in. I think that people will, if they find it valuable enough, then they will reconfigure their spaces to make it possible, which sounds a bit much, but, you know, 50 years ago, people didn't have TVs, and now look at our living rooms. You know, if people find it worthwhile and important, then they'll make a little bit of space to be able to exercise. If you look at things like Peloton or treadmills, you know, you can make that work.
I think to add to that as well, I think we always sort of saw the Exergame, particularly for our target adolescent users who are gamers, potentially low active, and don't see themselves as people who enjoy sport. So I think an Exergame is never going to be a replacement for sport, but taking someone who has the identity that they don't particularly like exercise and allowing them to do it in a fun, engaging space could be a platform to link up, you know, in the future with real-world partners as well. So I think that's why we find the kind of identity shift really interesting. So if we can use immersion to shift identity from someone who thinks they're a gamer to thinks they're a runner and a gamer, then they'd probably be more likely to try other sport opportunities or exercise opportunities in the future. So we think that's a really promising avenue as well.
Even if they're not running around the living room.
Yeah.
Okay. I think we have only time for one question. There's one here. If you could bring the microphone here. Oh, okay, so you got it?
Oh.
Okay, so. But by the way, before you ask, is there the sponsored talk, Wargaming, are they here? The sponsor doesn't want to give the talk? So if not, we have time for questions. Go on.
One of the biggest limitations to VR is the pricey hardware and of what equipment you need. So has there been thoughts on how you can introduce this sort of thing into gyms or shared spaces?
I didn't think you catch all of that.
I think so. We have, I think because our initial target, and let me know if I'm not answering your question, but our initial target are adolescents. We've done a lot of work with schools and whether they actually might be able to embed, have VR kit in the school. And because our game is designed to be calming but also exercising at the same time, the response we've had from teachers, for example, has been very much that yes, we would be very happy to have this kind of kit in the school. And also, I think just looking forward, the price is just going to go down significantly. So by the time we've kind of empirically tested our game, it will be a lot cheaper, and probably most people own some kind of VR. So I think we're sort of looking forward as well. But certainly, rolling out to gyms is something we're really interested in, and partnering up with that type of thing.
Okay, there was a question here. Oh, there's, okay, you ask. Microphone. Okay. No, but we can extend it because the talk that we assigned for the sponsor, they are not here. So we can take for questions. Sorry for you too, that you have to answer so many questions.
Thank you for your talk. So I was wondering what are the strategies you generally take to match a person's skill versus the difficulty of a game? Because especially in an exertion game like Beat Saber, it gets sort of overwhelming if the difficulty is too high for the person's physical capability. So I was wondering what strategies you've thought of or tried out?
Yeah, I think it's, that's a really important thing. So there's kind of two sets of groups who are making exergames, I think. There's one, so Nintendo probably made the most successful exergame of all time, in Wii Fit. And if you count Pokemon Go as an exergame, then they're involved there as well. I think, if you look at what they've done and what we've tried to do, is that you try and make it as accessible as humanly possible. Because if you're trying to get people who don't have an exercise habit, the worst thing you can do is say, you suck, you fail, you're dead, right? That's the worst thing you can do. Or having a leaderboard with all your friends and you're at the bottom. Like, no one wants to see that. Okay, that's really demotivating. So we try not to use competition or like failure states in our games to start with. I think those are really motivating for core gamers, for people who are more experienced. And that's why you see apps like Strava and Runkeeper and Nike really focus around competition and leaderboards, because those people already have some mastery and they're very confident and they don't mind doing that. And so that's my kind of very general thing, which is you're just trying to get people to play the game full stop, and you can see that being extended to other forms of gameplay, like Celeste, the platformer. I mean, I think it's really interesting in Nintendo's games. They try to add in difficulty modes where you can't die, basically. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's great. It broadens the audience.
Okay, then. I see there's no more question. So thank you again.